On an empty country road, a little girl in a pink dress covered in mud ran out of the forest, her thin voice cutting through the silence like something broken as her small hands shook and her chest burned while she chased a line of roaring motorcycles, screaming words that could chill even the toughest hearts, telling them that her mother had been hung from a tree and begging them to save her. Before we continue, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell in the comments where you're watching from. The man leading the long row of Harley Davidsons was Colt Henderson, a broad, silver-bearded rider and the respected leader of the Iron Heaven Riders, men who looked rough on the outside but knew real pain when they saw it. And the moment the child stumbled toward him, he slammed his brakes so hard the tires screamed while nearly 100 bikes behind him slowed together like rolling thunder. The girl, whose name he would soon learn was Harlow Grace, could barely stand as tears and dirt streaked her face, her legs shaking from running too far and too long, and Colt noticed the red marks on her wrists, the fear in her eyes, and the way she kept looking over her shoulder as if something terrible was still chasing her, making it clear this was no simple fear, but deep trauma. With a trembling finger, Harlow pointed toward the thick forest, and without asking questions, Colt turned his bike and headed straight into the trees, the rest of the riders following him without hesitation like a steel storm. And when Harlow tried to keep up, Colt gently lifted her onto the bike, placing her in front of him as she clutched his leather vest as if it were the last safe thing in the world. The path she led them down was narrow and hidden, covered in branches and ferns as if the forest wanted to hide what waited inside, and the bikers moved carefully on foot, leaves cracking under their boots, while Colt felt Harlow's heart pounding wildly against her chest, each step making the air feel heavier and darker. Then they reached a small clearing, open like a wound in the woods, and there beneath a huge oak tree hung a woman, her body swaying slightly, her feet barely touching the ground, her hands bound, and her head fallen forward, silencing every rider instantly as Colt rushed ahead and lifted her weight while another man cut the rope, and the woman, Aubrey Grace, collapsed in his arms weak and lifeless until he felt faint breathing still holding on. He laid her down gently, covering her with his vest while Harlow dropped beside her, gripping her mother's hand and crying so hard no sound would come out. And as Colt checked her pulse, barely there but still alive, memories of losing his own daughter years ago tore through him, and he silently promised this child would not be lost too. The bikers quickly formed a circle around them, one running for medical supplies while others stood guard, watching the trees. And as Aubrey's breathing slowly steadied, Harlow finally explained between sobs how dangerous men had broken into their small home the night before, accusing her mother of knowing something she didn't understand, tying Harlow up and leaving her behind until she escaped through a loose board and ran for hours through pain and fear until she saw the motorcycles coming toward her like hope. That was all Colt needed to hear, because it didn't matter who those men were or what they wanted, only that a mother and child had been hurt and were barely alive. And as the bikers carefully carried Aubrey back toward the road, taking turns supporting her, Colt kept Harlow close, her shaking slowly easing as she listened to his steady heartbeat. And when they reached the pavement, the riders formed a tight, moving wall around them and raced toward the nearest town, a roaring shield of metal and anger determined to protect what they had just saved. At the small town clinic, doctors rushed to treat Aubrey while Harlow sat curled in Colt's lap, her crying coming in broken waves as her small body shook nonstop, and Colt held her tightly like an unbreakable wall, realizing that even after holding dying brothers and saying goodbye to friends on cold battlefields, Nothing hurt him more than a child trying to be strong while her whole world felt shattered. The hours dragged on slowly as daylight faded, and when the doctor finally stepped out, exhaustion written across his face but relief in his voice, he told them Aubrey was alive, badly hurt and weak but stable, and Harlow burst into tears again, this time from relief, clinging to Colt as hope replaced terror, while Colt felt his own chest tighten and his eyes sting in a way he hadn't felt in years. The bikers stayed, not just for the night, but for days, taking turns guarding the clinic, their engines rumbling outside like loyal guardians, and Colt made sure Harlow ate, stayed warm, and felt safe sitting beside her bed when she was too afraid to sleep alone until she finally drifted off holding his hand. Over the following week, the riders helped rebuild the damaged cabin in the woods, fixing walls and windows, stocking the kitchen with food, installing lights and cameras, and even setting up regular patrols, turning a place of fear back into a home. And slowly Harlow began to smile again, first shy and uncertain, then brighter each day, running into Colt's arms whenever he arrived, wrapping her small hands around his tattooed arm with complete trust. Colt, who believed the part of him that knew how to be a father had died long ago, found himself looking forward to those hugs more than anything, while Aubrey, still recovering, often watched from the porch with quiet tears, knowing that without these rough-looking men who the world judged too quickly, she and her daughter would not be alive. Weeks later, when Colt prepared to ride away, Harlow cried and begged him not to leave, and the sound of her voice cut straight through him as he knelt and promised he would always come back, a promise he kept so faithfully that neighbors later joked Harlow had found herself a biker dad. The riders became more than rescuers. They became family. The forest lost its fear. The house felt full again, and Colt no longer carried the same hollow loneliness of a man who had lost everything, because in saving a mother and her child, he had unknowingly saved himself too.